For Payday 3, it's been a pretty wild few weeks. We've had the gameplay reveal trailer, a lot of our questions answered via that FAQ that went out the day after, as well as 3 of the 9 episodes of their Dev Diary series now releasing, and a few people like me managing to get their hands on the game early. Look, I'm going to mention it every now and again because I still can't quite believe it happened, okay? And it is actually relevant for this video because one thing that we haven't had much information on, one thing that I've asked Almir and some of the people in the studios about and not got much information on, and one thing a lot of you have been asking me to talk about to give some more information on, is how will modding work in Payday 3? Because it's not really something that we know very much about at this point, and admittedly, it isn't something that I know much about either. Considering my modding tutorial for Payday 2 is now the biggest video on my channel and is only a few thousand views away from 500,000 views, it kind of makes sense that you guys want to hear me talk about this, so fair play. Which is why before we get into this, I have to give a very special thanks to Dribbleondo, who is a modder that knows Payday 2 modding and also Unreal Engine modding on a much higher level than a lot of people. I was actually directed to them by Matt Helzer as well, so thank you to Matt for that. And as a special thank you to Dribbleondo, I'm going to link their YouTube, their Twitter, and also a webcomic that they're working on. All of those will be in the description. Go and support their work. They really did help me so much with this video. It wouldn't have happened without them. But Dribble has basically sat with me for hours, taught me through a lot of the key information, helped me structure the key points to give to you guys. So this is basically going to be not quite an idiot's guide, but a more accessible thing to explain what is possible and what also can and might not happen with Payday 3 modding. And even if you're just someone who wants to know what mods you'll be able to add into the game, hopefully this video will give you a bit more information as to what you can expect. It's obviously not guaranteed till we get more information, but this is reasonable assumptions we can make based on what we know previously with Unreal Engine and how Payday might incorporate that in Payday 3. Let's get into it. What I want to do is start off by just basically recapping Payday 2 modding very briefly for people who want a bit of context to be set. So within Payday 2, we obviously ran on Diesel engine. It's a very archaic engine, but it did provide a lot of mod possibilities. There were texture changes, music mods, cosmetic overhauls, modded heists, weapons, all that stuff. All you had to do to make Payday 2 mods work was download 2 files, SuperBLT and BeardLib. You get those installed in the right places, make a couple of folders in your game directory, and wham bam, you're done. You can install as many mods as you like for whatever you want. And all you have to do beyond then is just pray that updates of Payday 2 don't break it the way that update 237 did, which by the way, I've actually worked out what caused that now. Dribble explained it. It was because when they added the Epic Online services to matchmaking for Payday 2, they had their own DLL file, which is the same file extension that SuperBLT uses. So once they added their own DLL in, it broke the mods. So for anyone wondering about that, that's how that happened, because I just found that out. But basically the gist is, it was very easy to set up, and as long as Payday 2 updates don't break mods and they have to be fixed again, you could pretty much run with anything. And with Payday 2 having peer-to-peer matchmaking, basically meaning your connection is to the host of the lobby, not to some overall server, you either had 2 ways that mods would work. Either you'd only have to download them yourself if it was a cosmetic change or an audio change. So for example, if you've ever heard me playing Payday 2 and you hear Peter Capaldi's voice, that's something that only I have to install, no one else has to have it. But if you wanted to, for example, play a custom heist, everyone in the lobby would have to download it. You don't need a modded server, nothing like that. As long as everyone's got the thing installed for a bigger thing like a custom heist, you're good to go. So the main body of this video, and definitely the longest section of the document that I've written down all my information in, is regarding Payday 3 modding, because I want to explain a bit about Unreal Engine and the capabilities that offers. So Unreal Engine 4 is Payday 3's engine. We know that it's going to be upgraded to 5 later down the line, but that's something I want to touch on at the end of the video, because it doesn't really change a lot currently about Payday 3 modding, but it's a very moddable engine, so much so you can literally just download the engine on its own from the Epic Games Store. Very easy to do, and Unreal Engine 4 games can accept modding packages made using whatever version of Unreal Engine 4 the game runs on, because there'll be different versions based on different updates of Unreal Engine 4, that kind of thing. So once you know the version that it runs on, it's pretty easy to make mods for it. You put a couple of mods folders in the right places, kind of like Diesel modding, or just do some file directory rearranging and bam, you're easy to add mods. It's very simple. And at base, you can pretty much create anything you want with Unreal Engine modding. It's actually very capable and very widespread as to what you can do. If you want custom levels, animations, weapons, sound replacements, texture replacements, a whole bunch of stuff beyond that, then you can do that. But the only catch is that it's mostly limited at base to replacement mods, so changing things around, not necessarily adding in completely fresh content. So you can add a lot of things in at base, like texture replacements, audio replacements, that kind of thing, but if you want to do something more in depth, you need a bit more knowledge of the game's coding and what's going on behind the scenes. And until modders get their hands on Payday 3 and get to see what version of Unreal Engine 4 they're using and some of the Payday specific quirks within it, it's going to be hard to know how easy it will be to set up things like custom heists. It's possible, and it can happen. It's just a matter of time as to when that will begin to take shape. It may take a while after launch them to get there, or it may not take any time at all. We don't know. So it's just something I want to clarify there. Mods are possible in a lot of ways, but some may take more time to set up based on how long it takes the modders to get used to the framework Payday 3 is working on. There are issues that could show up over time, and again, it very much depends on the version of Unreal Engine 4 that's used. For instance, Dribble specified to me specifically that there is a feature within Unreal Engine 4 called Blueprints, and what Blueprints is a feature that allows you to basically code visually in a much easier fashion for people who maybe don't know game development as well as other people. So if you want an accessible way to build games, you can use Blueprints, and it basically makes it a bit easier to structure the game development without you having some of the most specific core details of game development. It's actually quite a cool feature, but the problem with it is not very easily reverse engineered. So if a game is using Blueprints, you need to get the hang of how to reverse engineer that to add mods. So that could create problems. But we don't know if Payday 3 is even using it, so it may not even be something worth considering. That's just something I'm pointing out as a potential caveat that could cause a problem. And again, it's why modders will need to get their hands on it to specify some of these things. But with all that being said, the main point is that Payday 3 should, in theory, easily be modded. In theory, and it just depends on what kind of mods and how long it will take. Dribble's knowledge comes from modding things like the Spyro Reignited trilogy and Psychonauts 2, and much of the technical stuff within them translates quite easily to other games, basically down to the inherent similarities of Unreal Engine 4. Regardless of the version you're using, there are very core concepts that can be applied to any game realistically that uses Unreal Engine 4, within reason, of course. And so it basically means that in one way or another, Starbreeze would have to go out of their way to make sure modding doesn't work at all in Payday 3. It's very easy to implement, it's just a question of how much and when it happens. But I will mention before we move on to the next section that if you do want to get a better idea of how Payday 3 modding could work, Dribble has provided me with a link to the modding wiki for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, so you can go in there and read the step-by-step instructions. So if you are interested in getting a bit ahead of the curve and knowing how it might work, it may give you something you can apply to for when Payday 3 comes out. So if you want a bit of extra knowledge, give it a snoop, link will be in the description. But now that we've talked about core Payday 3 modding, one thing we have to focus on is the impact of crossplay. Because we already know Payday 3 is coming out on Xbox, PS5, and PC via Steam and the Epic Games Store, and also the Microsoft Store. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but they're the 4 core platforms, basically. And we know there's going to be crossplay and cross-progression, which is basically Starbreeze saying, look, we know we messed up on consoles. If we have crossplay and cross-progression across all platforms, we literally can't screw up again, otherwise we'll break the game. All well and good. But does that have consequences for modding? Well, yeah. At their very core and in their very nature, mods are a PC-based thing. It doesn't really show up on console very much unless you're a company like Bethesda that goes out of their way to incorporate mods onto a console game like they did with Skyrim and Fallout 4, which was absolutely brilliant, don't get me wrong, but you don't really see it happen with games beyond that. So unless a game developer makes a proper full-on effort to make it work, you're not going to get mods on console. It's just not very easy to do. But what that means in tandem is that PC players can't use mods that would then compromise the experience of console players by breaking lobbies, making things not function correctly. So you've got to bear that in mind when you're modding Payday 3 on PC, because you have got a wider audience now at play that you have to bear in mind, and that could break some functionality. The plus side, however, is that any PC mods that are user-end from a visual or coding standpoint, so changing clothing with a bit of a reskin, texture, sound changes, that kind of thing, they should no doubt be fine regardless of you playing crossplay or not, because kind of like they work in Payday 2, they're mods that only you need to have installed to change the experience. It won't be heard, seen, or anything by anyone else, and therefore inherently won't break a lobby. So those should be okay regardless. The problem you've got though is lobby-wide things like a modded weapon that you're actually adding in as its own gun, or a modded heist that is completely new, has been created by a modder from the ground up. Those are going to be unable to be played in a lobby. And that's because whatever you want to play or use needs to be on the server this time around, and not just on the PCs of people playing in the way Payday 2 was. As I said, that had peer-to-peer matchmaking. This game now, Payday 3, has dedicated lobbies. So you're connecting to a lobby server rather than the host's connection. That changes things. If something isn't on the overall server, you can't use it as a mod, so you need that heist to be available on the server for everyone to play it. Everyone downloading it would not make a difference there. Now, I know that might make alarm bells ring, and it might make you think, oh my god, we won't be able to do custom heists at all. What are we going to do? But don't worry just yet, because when I played Payday 3 early, one thing that I noticed was that crossplay could be toggled off or on. You don't have to play crossplay with other platforms if you don't want to. And that means that PC modded servers are in theory possible. You'd have to make a proper modded server rather than just players in a standard lobby having mods installed. So it's more intricate and it will require a lot of work, and it's dependent on the modders having the chance to get into the game, get a better grasp of the capabilities of Payday 3 modding, and also reverse engineering the code and analysing how the game interacts with its servers, Epic Online services, which is no doubt going to be used for crossplay. And the main issue with that, again, is that it takes both work and a lot of time. These things are possible. crossplay is creating an issue, but it's not necessarily something that is unbeatable. It's something the modders could get around if the things work out the way they want them to, and they've got the time to work around it. So modded heists, etc. are possible, and the key thing I'm basically trying to reinforce, in case it wasn't obvious already, is that not everything's going to be possible at launch, but will become more possible over time as modders get more chance to experiment with the game and see what they can and can't do with the game's coding. I do also want to mention the Microsoft Store very briefly though, because when it was announced that Payday 3 was going to be Game Pass day one, that's PC and console, so you can buy the game on PC via the Microsoft Store or download it as part of Game Pass Ultimate. Now, if you have the game on the Microsoft version, modding that could be more challenging. The general gist I got off Dribble is while they haven't got a whole heap of experience with the Microsoft version, it's still possible to mod that version, it's just going to be more annoying. Microsoft's PC system for games is not quite as easily accessible as Steam or, heck, even Epic, so if you're playing on Microsoft's PC version, you may struggle a bit more to mod. Just putting that out there. It's not confirmed, but it's worth thinking about if you're going into the game and thinking what platform you want to play on. Now, obviously, most people are going to play on Steam, so it won't matter to a lot of you, and I get that, but bear in mind, obviously, we have a few different pockets of people that play on different platforms. Linux players, for example, there are these little communities of people that will play on different platforms, so to anyone who might play on Microsoft PC, just bear in mind modding could be a bit more challenging. We don't know for sure, it's a bit of a grey area, but just bear it in mind, basically. But another thing that came up in conversation with Dribbleondo that I wanted to focus on was anti-cheat. As a lot of you know, Payday 2 doesn't exactly have a very intricate anti-cheat system. You know, people get occasionally labelled as cheaters if they add a certain mod in that breaks the game, and that's pretty much it. I don't really know much else about anti-cheat beyond that, because I don't think there's much to talk about. But it's also something that Starbreeze didn't share any information on while we were in Sweden. They didn't talk about it in any presentations, bringing it when we were playing. Didn't really come up. So that means that it's either something that they're keeping their cards close to their chest on, that they've got a plan and haven't felt like sharing it yet, like modding itself, or they haven't quite decided how to implement it yet. It could be one way or the other, and we just genuinely don't know. But anti-cheat is quite common in a lot of online games now, and unless you're a game that's made by, say, Valve, Blizzard, or Riot, you're probably going to have BattleEye or Easy Anti-Cheat active in your game. But would anti-cheat impact mods at all? Well, not necessarily, but it has happened in the past. For example, Multiversus, if you guys remember that game, that used Easy Anti-Cheat. And at one point during Multiversus' original life cycle, before the whole game got shut down, or whatever happened there, I don't know, Easy Anti-Cheat got an update that basically allowed the developers, if they wanted to flick a switch that basically said, ban all custom content, no mods are allowed, get gone. And there's actually a thread I'm going to link in the description as well, underneath the Spyro wiki thing, where the modders said that Warner Bros. Had reached out to them and told them to take down all mods. They managed to negotiate to keep the old mods, but basically they couldn't add new ones in. So there was a feature added basically that just blocked mods entirely and you couldn't make any more new ones, but that is optional for anti-cheat. So while anti-cheating software, as some of you might know, has capability to shut off mods, that's something that has to be chosen to do. It's not inbuilt within the cheating software. It's not, you're using anti-cheat, therefore mods can't happen. You've got to make that conscious decision to block mods at the same time. So Starbreeze, kind of like what they've done with consoles, they know their audience, they know what people want, they know what to get right and what to, avoid doing. They don't want to make mistakes, ideally, really, right? They know there's a lot of modders in the Payday 2 community. Payday 2 arguably has thrived a lot in the last 5 years in particular because of its modding, especially in that gap between the White House and Border Crossing. Modding kept the game alive for a good bit of time there. They don't want to annoy the modding community, and I really, really doubt, as I've said earlier, unless they go out of their way to break modding, that they would add something like that in an anti-cheat. So if Payday 3 has an anti-cheat system, fingers crossed, it shouldn't impact mods. That was the point of what I wanted to say there. There's only two things left, kind of follow-on topics I want to touch on just before we wrap up this video. First off is a Payday 3 beta. Now, we've had no news from Overkill about this. We have no idea if it's something that they're cooking. I'm personally really hoping that they do it. I've said it before on record on my videos and streams. I really want them to do a beta purely because 3 months before the game launches to play it, especially now people have seen gameplay, they're going to want to try it sooner rather than later before the game comes out. So, fingers crossed we get one. The advantage of getting a beta, though, is that it would be ideal for modders. It'll allow them to get into the game and get a peek ahead of time at the version of Unreal Engine 4 Starbreeze are using, and enabling them to figure out how to begin to mod the game, how to begin to reverse engineer the code, how to investigate the intricacies of the Payday specific quirks in the game files, allow them to get used to it and work around it so they've got some notes to start off with and hit the ground running when Payday 3 launches. It's just like I keep saying, it's all time dependent on how long it takes the modders to crack a lot of this stuff. If they get a head start in a beta, that makes things a lot easier later down the line. If the beta is anything like the build I played, of course there is the possibility that it won't be a full game. It might just be you get to play 1 or 2 heists like I did, you only get to play with 4 of the characters because we still don't know who the other 2 are. So if you're wondering if that kind of changes anything, because I was thinking it might do, it wouldn't. The core framework of the game would still be there in the beta, and that's what matters for them to investigate and figure out how modding works. Doesn't matter if the beta only is a shell of what Payday 3 is at launch, the coding and the actual framework of the game would still be the same in theory, unless they change it, which it wouldn't make sense for them to do. So it gives them that good head start, and even if some file structures change, they'd be easy to work around, so modders will basically only benefit from a beta, just like us players would, because I'm sure we all want to get our hands on the game properly, so fingers crossed we get a beta, not just for our own sake, not just for content's sake, but for modders' sake as well. It will be very useful to them. And so we come on to the final point of the video, which I mentioned earlier I wanted to touch briefly on Unreal Engine 5. More to note it as a potential roadblock down the line, but one we don't have much information on right now. Payday 3 is confirmed to be upgrading to Unreal Engine 5 post-launch. We don't know when, could be a month after, could be a year after. We have no idea. It was just confirmed in the FAQ that it was going to happen at some point. The problem is we don't know what effect that will have on modding. Dribble doesn't have much experience with Unreal Engine 5. As I said, they're more used to Psychonauts, Spyro Reignited, they're Unreal Engine 4 based games, and therefore applying knowledge to that version of the engine, Unreal Engine 4. And while Unreal Engine 5 is still an Unreal Engine and still should have some similarities to Unreal Engine 4, we don't know how much changes behind the scenes in the coding. It's very possible that mods could be a very smooth transition. You need to fix a few things and everything will pretty much work. It's also possible that everything could break aside from maybe base replacement mods like user end changes, like changing textures and sounds. We don't really know the level of how things could break, change, or hopefully stay the same in that engine switch. We just don't know it right now. So it isn't something that I want to touch on too much now because even Dribble doesn't have much information on this. It's simply something I want to mention now to inform you guys so that you know that once we have got used to Payday 3 and the modding of it with Unreal Engine 4, when Unreal Engine 5 comes out, it could be a bit of chaos for a brief period of time as things get fixed. But I mean, realistically, is that anything different to what we've had with Payday 2 when big game-breaking updates have been released, like Update 237? Payday 2 PC players are used to this stuff by now. It may just be a more dramatic version of that, or it may be nothing like it at all. We just don't know. But I thought it's best to mention it, because as I've said, it's kind of an overall introductory guide to how modding will work, so that you know what to expect going into Payday 3. And ladies and gentlemen, that's everything I wanted to talk about. I've gone through a few chapters there, covered a few bits of key information, and I think it gives you a good general gist as to what to expect with what may be possible with Payday 3 modding. So in conclusion, with Unreal Engine 4, the world is your oyster with modding. The problem is, within Payday 3, we don't know how the coding's going to work, how easy it will be to set up some of these things, and you've got caveats such as crossplay, possible anti-cheat issues, but they're very unlikely, but other things you need to consider as external factors now that could make things take longer or maybe lock off certain types of mods. I think at its very base, you'll be able to change very simple things like textures, sounds, with a great deal of ease. I don't think that should be very challenging at all, and for people like me, that might be more than enough. But if you're out there thinking you want to access custom heists, it's very possible it can happen. We just need more information and more time to figure out how that will work. And who knows, maybe I'll get better at making mods in Payday 3, because all I've done really are the odd couple of logo changes and changing every single texture in the Alesso heist to cover pale waves instead. I'm not exactly the most experienced modder, so it'd be nice to get a bit of a better grasp of that with Unreal Engine 4, so who knows, maybe I'll dip my toes into the pool a bit more. We'll find out. But either way, that is everything I want to talk about in this Payday 3 video, so thank you all very, very much for watching. I do greatly appreciate it. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, shows you like this content and would like to see more. Drop a comment down below as to what you're looking forward to with Payday 3 modding, what you're hoping will be possible. Are you a big Payday 2 modder currently? Are you looking forward to getting into it maybe with Payday 3? Let me know. And don't forget, as always, if you haven't clicked that subscribe button, please do so, as it would be greatly appreciated. It shows me that you like the content, you want to stay in tune for all future Payday 3 content for all platforms. Feels good to say that, knowing that everything's going to get the same content. Good stuff. But apart from that, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you all very soon with some brand new videos. Until then, look after yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon.